But I would like to, for public statement, Charlie Kedlick had asked at the previous meeting what the new FTEs were for fiscal year 23, and Mr. Barrett was kind enough to provide those numbers for Mr. Kedlick, and I'll just read those out loud for the public. 1.76 additional FTEs in the fiscal year 23 general fund budget, diversity director of 1 FTE, a COA volunteer coordinator of 0.38 FTEs, a customer service rep of 0.38 FTEs for the 1.76. There are 3.8 additional FTEs in other funds in the budget, ambulance enterprise fund of 2 FTEs, environmental analyst of 1 FTE, and a clinical first responder of 0.8 FTEs for a total of 3.8. Thank you, Mr. Barrett, for providing that. The next item on our agenda is the point of view, and I'll turn that over to Ms. Russell.
Okay. All right. I hope I've managed to take all the feedback and create the story we want. So I'm hoping we can get through the main body fairly quickly and then fly through the addendums. So every slide pretty much has something updated on it. There you go. I did throw the "we do not support an operational override" back on the bottom of the front page because Charlie loved it so much and Adam requested.
I'm not against it.
We pulled it because we've all agreed that the town has agreed that school has agreed that we're not going to have one.
Yeah, but it's important to pay attention to multiple years too. So.
Yes, it's forward thinking. So, all right.
Whoa.
Okay.
That was the TV.
Was it really?
Yeah, the TV just moved. Big time.
It's a very dense presentation. Do you want to give it a wiggle? Like, or not? Is it coming out of the... Okay. It's very exciting. Okay. We're all up to date on our liability insurance, Mr. Barrett? All right, good, excellent. Woo, just in time.
Does this kind of like it? Is that Phil and Gabe?
Yeah.
Talk to you later.
Yes, okay, good.
The first 3 points are all kind of obvious paragraphs or meanings. Taxpayer, I'd love another word in there. Taxpayer pain, taxpayer burden, I like a lot. I think what we're getting at there is the foreshadowing of the discussion later on about how taxpayers can't bear more. But I would love another word in there to make it fit in with the others.
Okay. Well, if you could hold that thought and we'll go through, and when we get to the taxpayer section and we'll go through it and then we'll decide if maybe there's a better word I could use. I was trying to get something. Yeah.
Impact.
I would say
Should we be saying taxpayer? Should we be saying resident?
I mean, are we just talking about our taxpayers?
No, but residents
They may-
pay rent. They don't.
Indirectly, they pay.
tax. It is.
Yeah.
Okay, I would just ask that we shelve what we're going to call it until we actually have covered the 2 slides that it relates to, and then the whole picture, we should be able to come up with something that works. Okay, so the Adam had asked to have the Prop 2.5 definition back in early on, so right off the bat. Okay. So it was asked that we just be more clear about what the graph was showing. Obviously, that black line on the green is not working, so I will have to do some coloring there. But the other thing that was asked was that I highlight the shortfall.
Why is the black line in fiscal year 20 below the budget. We can't fix it.
It's in the ALG plan. I can change it, but those are the numbers from the ALG plan.
Because there are other sources of revenue, right? So if you're using reserves, and or if you get so this was, let's be clear, this is not total revenue. This is revenue from real estate taxation.
This is total revenue from the ALG plan, from the front page of the ALG plan. It's all revenue. It's got debt exclusion. It's got the whole 9 yards.
Oh, so that's different from the chart that I sent you, right?
It is different from the chart that,
Okay.
that you sent me. I can work with Steve and see if we can get that number fixed, but in the ALG plan as it sits, that's how the math works out. So pretend that's not there, or it's already fixed, and going forward, if you have any concerns about the readability, or obviously besides the black on green, it's not working out so well. Okay, and everybody gets the message. So then we kind of talk about what are the drivers of those numbers, and we wanted more data. So those last two bullets. Something we requested in the last meeting. Okay? All right. Yep, sure. I'm hoping this makes it clear that when we're fiddling with the budget, oftentimes the only thing we're fiddling with is that percentage.
I had to read the bottom two bullets a few times.
Okay.
If we could figure out how to make that shorter, clearer, crisper, something.
Okay. Yep.
So a question that pops up in my mind, which might come up in other people's mind when we're giving the presentation, is the footnote. What was the previous percentage of the school's budget, which was salary and fringe, since we did make a footnote
Yep.
that it's increased based on a couple of factors? Somebody might just say,
It's-
oh, well, what was it previously?
It's not a huge number. It was 76 point something %, and I can have it in the speaker's notes so that we can answer it.
Yeah.
I think it's just noteworthy that that happened despite cuts. So yeah, no, I
I
keep
agree,
that in
and
the speaker's notes.
I like that you point out what the drivers of that are. Thank you.
Sure.
I didn't think that the contract of increase of greater than 4% was true for the town contracts.
So what, they negotiated an average of a 2.5%, but that's just cost of living. So if you add it to their like steps and lanes and regular increases, you still end up greater than 4%.
So both municipal and,
Yes.
okay, because I thought the school was on a different,
They may be on a bigger trajectory, but
Any appetite to, rather than say out of 37,722,544, just take that out and put in a percentage so that we know that, so that we see that one is a greater percentage discretionary versus the other?
I mean, it's percent, like we've got the 75%.
No.
Oh, sorry,
No, no.
maybe I'm.
Last two lines.
Yep.
What we're highlighting here is that there's 9.4 million is discretionary and is not, or quote unquote, the way the Fed's described discretionary,
Yep.
and is not already spent on personnel. Well, that is X% of the total budget. So just do the
So it's just the
9.4
inverse.
million is X% of 37.7 million. Take out that whole thing and just put in a percentage.
It's
It should be
inverse of the top two
25%.
lines.
See, if the top number is 75%, then it's got to be 25%.
So it's automatic. Okay.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying.
Is that,
Okay.
okay.
The 25 and 20.5% respectively.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. And we'll see if we can make that a little more readable. Okay, so then what we figured out last time is that we still wanted to see Minuteman in the bottom because it's something that we have no real voter control over. So then, and I'll tweak the colors so that they're a little more distinct. The blue part is town plus school.
The blue bars are the entire revenue, right?
It's available revenue sorry, you're right. It is available revenue, you're right, I said that wrong. It is available revenue minus what we have to pay for Minuteman.
I think you need to put in the word excluding, because it looks,
Instead of math.
well, available revenue, it could be dash Minuteman.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, excluding Minuteman. Yep. Because the idea behind this is what number's left, right? If we're locked into Minuteman and we have control over that amount and we only want to hit what our projected revenue is, that's the increase that is left.
So for fiscal year '24, the two budgetary entities need to come in with budget increases of 0.12%.
Unless revenue is going to come in higher than we currently project.
And we have it currently projected at what, about 3.3 or something like that on the LG plan? Okay.
Can you put the Minuteman at the top of the bar rather than the bottom of the bar?
I can.
I think that would be more visually.
The problem if I do is that the revenue line will cover it. So I'd either have to put the revenue line above it, which wouldn't exactly be accurate. I guess I'll play around with the colors and see if I can make it so it's something we can see. Maybe if I make it yellow.
Yeah, it should be brighter. I think the other reason not to put it at the top is that it's easier to see, even though it's tiny, it's easier to see how much it's growing when it's at the bottom because it has a relative flat line to start from.
This is true.
Can we make it say available for increase or something to that effect? Like that is the amount that is available for them to increase their budgets by.
Random words.
Yes, in many, many fewer words than that.
Steve, are you okay with leaving the Minuteman at the bottom? Or is there?
Yeah, maybe a brighter color. I don't
Brighter
know,
color,
but
yeah. I'll put to make sure there's a better contrast and, yeah. It's perfectly contrasted and balanced on my screen. I don't know what you're.
It's not better.
Yeah, it's not bad up there either. Yeah.
A yellow or
Yeah, so based on projected revenue, if you take the Minuteman payments out of the revenue, how much is left?
Okay,
We can only increase over the previous year that 0.12, and the following year 2.12, and the following year 2.53.
okay.
That a lot going on.
Do you have the data to tell us what those numbers are?
Yeah, I can.
In like right now? I'm just surprised that the increase in the Minuteman budget is taking up presumably around 2%.
There's
total
there's
revenue.
not no, but the projected revenue on 23 to 24 is almost flat.
Okay.
So there's it goes up very little, and that's why. And then the following 2 years, they're anticipating greater revenue increases.
No greater.
Higher growth?
Sure,
So we may want to double check that number with Mr. Barrett.
sure. It's
Was 24 the year that the excluded debt drops out? Is that why the revenue's
yeah.
flat? Okay. Do we want to blame it all on Minuteman? Do we want to throw in the health insurance trust and the Middlesex pension assessments as well? I mean, they go up and eat up.
They do. Are those generally in the operating budgets, though?
Yeah.
Okay. So,
As you called out on a different slide.
I wonder if we can speak to them.
This is unfortunately a beautiful slide arguing against being in Minuteman.
You wanted Minuteman split out.
I know I
So I
do.
did.
But I hate,
And this is what's left. This is reality. This is what's left. And if we're going to speak to reality,
The reason I bring up the others is there's little control over those either.
right.
Yeah.
But can you tell me what the health insurance trust is going to be in 25 and 26?
I can tell you what it was as of the end of June.
Right, right. Middlesex, and we can increase those by 6%. I think there's a lot of knowns.
Are they really telling us those are the numbers, or those are their projections?
These are projections. It's projected revenue and it's projected spending, and that's, the point is based on your projections for stable funding of budgets and personnel and services. You were, hold on, here, which is, which we're off by
5 million.
5 million in 3 years,
Well, Middlesex isn't going to go up any less than 6% a year,
right?
ad nauseum.
Right.
Health Insurance Trust is a harder one to predict. It's been as low as 0, as high as 10. You can use 5, to be conservative. But
Yeah. So I think we can do our part when we present this in being very clear about some of the drivers. Yeah, Christy, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I think that slide with Minuteman is actually very misleading to what the message is. We're trying to say, could you show us the version without the Minuteman in it? But what we're pointing out here is that there's really very little room. And it's real easy to look at this and say, but what the heck is going on about Minuteman? And the fact is, that's for a different discussion. That shouldn't be what this takeaway from this slide is. So I was hoping you could show us the slide you had from last time.
So the slide I had from last time is simply, this graph would all be one color. It doesn't change, right? It would still be the same bar chart, because I would have just combined those numbers and they would have met revenue. So whatever the revenue increase year over year is, that's the amount we could have increased total. But we, our concern was that,
But it's the same percent increases at the top, those little boxes?
no, it's that plus whatever Minuteman would take up.
Can we have it be the big things, but just those little boxes? Those numbers, because the Minuteman is already allocated?
Yep.
Is that okay?
I would like to have the Minuteman numbers are all rolled into the big columns, not separated out, but have the available for increase budgets based on these numbers, not the overall bar. Minuteman's budget is set, as far as we are concerned. So what we have available for budgetary planning purposes is 0.12%, not what it would be if you rolled the Minuteman number back in and pretended you didn't know what their increase was.
So, are you going to keep it as is or to change it?
I would like to keep the 0.12% number as available for increases, but take out the separation of Minuteman from those big bars. Remove mention of Minuteman from this chart,
Why?
because I think it's distracting from the discussion.
I don't think so.
We're not changing in the next 3 years what
That's
we're
okay,
spending
but-
relative to Minuteman.
Well, but that's a contributing factor, right? So I don't understand why are we going back to where we were like a meeting or two ago when we added the Minuteman?
Because we have to decide whether we think what we're showing is the message that we want to be sending.
Let me throw some comments in here. I think I hear what Christy's saying. This is kind of vilifying Minuteman, but I think there might be a consortium among the town members who would love to vilify Minuteman. I think we need to send the message in the correct way, so I definitely hear what you're saying. What this graph is telling me is that if I am the school or I am the town, between myself, the school, and the town, whichever the other party is, we only have 0.12% increase to work with, and we have to meet that, whereby there's this other budgetary entity out there who doesn't have to meet anything, who can spend at will. And that is definitely a point of discussion. I don't know for sure if that's what we want to discuss in this point of view, but I think we should all be talking about where we want to discuss that, because that is an important issue going forward. So I hear what you're saying, but I also recall that the reason we wanted to start talking about this was to start bringing the elephant in the room out and talking about it, because people don't seem to be talking much about it. But Christy's right, we can't control it, just like we can't control the health insurance trust, just like we can't control inflation and other things. Go ahead.
I'm just going to push back a little against spend at will. They still have some loans to take out for the building project that we previously signed up for and agreed to be a part of. As our enrollment goes up, our rolling average is going to go up. So this reflects both of those things, and not necessarily like rampant unusual spending. It's simply part of what we all signed on for, and it may look a little, you know, like a lot. Right now, it's going to level out. So, you know, we do need to be careful about showing a slide where we're really trying to get across how much money is available, and instead it is going to turn into us versus Minuteman, just because of the way it's presented. I think you're, you know,
I think-
you're right to be cautious about
I
it.
think we are derailing what we want to say with the slide by having the Minuteman highlighted in it. I'm not saying that Minuteman shouldn't be a part of the discussion. I don't think it should be part of this POV right now, but I think this isn't saying what we are trying to say.
Well, I don't feel like we're vilifying anybody. We're just presenting the facts as they are. And I also don't think we should hide those facts simply to prevent somebody from thinking we are vilifying it.
We're not hiding anything. We're not including the health insurance trust and the contracts and all those other things. Is what we're breaking out. I'm saying this is distracting from what we're trying to say.
Oh,
So let's go around the table and get some more input. Go ahead, Mr. Name.
well, if the point is, there are a lot of numbers coming from assessments we don't directly control, then the health insurance trust and the Middlesex pension assessment and the Minuteman High School are all in the same boat. One of them is usually, it's a separate entity in our way we show our numbers, but we have probably less control over Middlesex pension. Heck, I think, Steve, you're the only representative on Middlesex pension, and how much say do you have over what happens there?
Well, not to jump in, but for the record, one time, probably 5 or 6 years ago, I talked about how if the formula recommends a 6.5% increase, and that's their target, how do they expect us to, you know, live with that given our revenue constraints? And I don't think I was invited back after that.
And the health insurance trust is more of a, we're pretty much at the mercy of what happens in the healthcare market. So from my standpoint, the three of them are pretty much the same. We have limited control over any of them, but they all combine to put the ability of the town and school district to increase their budgets to a very minimal amount, if it's even positive. Jason wants to go.
Jason?
So if we want to make it the point of, you know, our hands are tied because of these other entities, I'm okay with calling out all three of them. But question, has the health insurance trusts gone up 300% in 5 years?
No.
Okay, because Minuteman has. And so Minuteman has gone from being about 1% of our total expenditure, or 1.5% of our total expenditure, to about 4% of our total expenditure in 5 years. That's significant. So if we want to, if what we're trying to deliver on this slide is that our hands are tied by entities we have no control over, then yes, we have to put in all of the non-discretionary things that we have no control over that is not salary and fringes. But if we really want to call out why we are having so much less, and I'm using the word discretionary here incorrectly, but hopefully you understand where I'm coming from. If we want to call out why we have so much less discretionary money spent than in years past, it is important to note that 4.5% of our budget is now being tied up by Minuteman. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm saying that's a fact.
I mean, health insurance trust increase was 0 a few years ago. It was 10% last year. It's part of the same issue. What are we trying to say here? You know, are we trying to say we have very little latitude on budgets? If that's the case, then anything that we can't control that increases more than 2.5% ought to be on the slide. If we're just trying to talk about the worst case scenario being Minuteman, then yeah, okay. We put that and single that one out. But I would tend to agree with Christie. It's kind of like baiting a certain segment to only focus on that and to just gloss over everything else.
I'd be fine to have a slide like this that says where we're constrained, and then have a pie chart of where that constraint comes from. Health insurance trust is a 6% problem, 6% year-over-year problem. What's the other one that you wanted?
HIT.
HIT is a 9% problem. And then we present the facts that over the last couple of years, Minuteman has been a 21.5% problem, 11.6% problem, a 19% problem, a 26% problem, a 30% problem, and is projected to be a 30% problem, an 18% problem, and a 9% problem for the next 3 years.
Christine?
I think so I got to this a lot because at our last meeting, we were hoping we could present some percentage, some number that could then, be a recommendation to drive the conversation for budget holders, but stakeholders. But stakeholders also have access to ALG. They know about health insurance. They know about Middlesex. So maybe the answer is to combine it all and just show the revenue year-over-year increase percentage, and they work out how they get to that number. Steve knows what he's got.
Any more comments on this end? Microphone?
Microphone.
If you go back 2 slides, and that shows the projections, what our current expectation is based on ALG, the 2.4, the 4.0, and the 5.26. Is it fair to say that that delta would need to be captured with an override? Because we're limited to those numbers 2 slides after this, right, of 0.1% or 0.25%?
Yeah, and unless they redid their budgets, brought them down.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that it might be nice, just for the sake of the slide deck, is having the spending, and you could have this slide, and then the next slide, keep the compensation part, and then at the bottom, you could mention those additional drivers, which is HCIT, Middlesex, whatever, and you could even put some percentages in for the last year or two. Then you could go to the next slide, and you could show that delta and say, like, this requires an override, or something to that effect. And then you could mention what assumptions went into those forecasts, which are the numbers Jason was talking about, which are among. I'm just thinking from a slide deck perspective how to link these together, because it doesn't really flow that well right now, and I think everybody has good information, but the budget's being crowded out by a lot of items, salary, wages, benefits, et cetera, being the biggest part. But there's a couple other items that you could articulate, and then you could sort of summarize it with override required in the slide deck. You could circle that deficit and say, whatever it is, 4 million, override required or whatever. And then that draws people's attention immediately to it. All the rest kind of gets to be a little bit of noise. I know what the bigger drivers are, but geez, an override, okay. When I presented this deck in the past, a lot of this would be really kind of in the weeds for an audience to know that Middlesex assessment's important, or Minuteman rather, and then the other items, but it kind of takes away from the message, which is we have this widening gap, and an override should be highlighted, I think, on that with whatever it is, just a circle that says override required, if that's the case.
Right.
Thank you. Roland, Mike, any comments?
Yeah, good day. Potential override, not expecting a team override. As we know.
Lean in, Roland, lean in.
I mean, as we know, a lot of things change within the course of a year, or the course of even 6 months. So taking Minuteman out, this wouldn't bother me. And just say, so this would just be solved. That part wouldn't change. It's all a number. It's all part of the budget. Spending. these are what we have for available increases. If it increases any more above this, potentially we need an operating override.
Okay.
Mike, any comments? Okay.
I agree. I think once you get into the weeds, once you get into the weeds of some of that minor detail, even though Minuteman is not a minor detail, I think you're distracting from the overall message we're trying to present. And we're going to have a time issue, and you probably just stick to the big bullet items.
One last point on that is, the slide after this one could say, budget items most directly in our control. And you could have the salaries, wages, and benefits, and then below that is less able to control. And then you could list all these other items, because we're not going to change any of these, the health insurance trust or Minuteman or whatever. But you can say, messages, you can control compensation increases. Okay, well, that's something we could do. Like, there's a message is, there's likely an override coming, and the one thing you could do to control that is salary, wages, and benefits, grow them at a smaller number.
Okay, so based on those comments, I think personally I've just had a nice little epiphany on what this slide should say or is trying to say. And I think the story this slide should be telling is that based on this slide, two previous, with the ALG numbers in there and showing the deficit, what this slide could show is what the projections are from the slide, two slides previous, what sort of the normal historical growth rate has been. It's usually been around 2.5 to 3% for each one of the budgetary entities. They're just kind of showing kind of an average, and then showing this line, what it needs to be this year to stick within the revenue, to show that there's these gaps between what's currently kind of needed, what's historically been budgeted, and what people are going to have to, what the budgetary entities are going to have to meet this year in order to stay within revenue. And it sounds like we should probably remove Minuteman from this particular slide and discussion. Any more comments on that?
I just want to clarify, I think we need to have those available increase squares, have those, removing Minuteman, have these numbers in it, these, rather than the ones we had in the previous version of the slide, because this is what the budgeting entities we're talking to have to work with. This is the select board and the school district need to fit within that 0.12%, not whatever the number was previously when we had Minuteman rolled into the whole thing.
I'll find a way to do that.
I mean, I hear what everyone's saying. I think I would still like to see the breakdown of the increases for the various things we can't control. If you don't want to call out Minutemen, that's fine. We can lay out all of them, but I would like a slide somewhere that says, you know, these are the increases. I don't think anyone really realizes how fast some of these things are growing, you know? So I think it's our duty to bring it to people's attention, quite frankly.
Christine?
See what I can get my hands on. I think the increase in Minuteman over the years, as Jason spoke to, suggests that some of these things haven't been increasing as much as we think they have. So our available revenue is getting smaller.
Jason?
So I have no idea how hard this is to make from a slide perspective, and I'm definitely not offering to do it. But what I just had envisioned here is we have a build where the first thing that you see, keep that top line. The first thing you see is salary and fringes. Then next thing you see is HIT. Next thing you see is Middlesex. The next thing you see is Minuteman. Or put it in whatever order you want. I don't care what the order is. But by having it build, and then at some point, you're going to see that it trips above that line. And that's the point where we say, and that's where we have a problem. And we can do it in whatever order you want. If you want to do Minuteman first and do HIT first, second, or whatever. But because I'm not trying to point the finger at any individual person, individual entity, but I'm pointing out that when you add this all together, it's going to fail.
I can probably do that. Yes, ma'am.
Never mind.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'm envisioning that slide rather than being dollar amounts, being percentage increases, budgetary percentage increases, year on year on year. I don't know, we may have to talk about it offline.
I'll see what I can get access to.
Okay.
Okay.
Christine, is this PowerPoint hell?
It's
We seem to go to this meeting and
it's worse.
reinvent these slides.
It's worse because Google, I don't have PowerPoint, so, I'm using like Google slideshow or whatever it is. And this bar graph and that line graph are not actually the same chart because it won't do that. It'll do it for one thing and one line, but not stacked chart plus the line. So it's fine. I will make it happen. It's good. It's good. Let's look at the next one.
Is it incendiary to say FY23 budgeted use of $1.25 million brings free cash down to 3.18% of total budgets?
No, it's in our, they went up first and then went down to 3.18%. I feel like we've made so much progress with them. Like, they're doing exactly what we've asked, which is not to spend it beforehand.
Okay.
ABRSD uses the story there. Yeah.
I'm not sure why the first sub-bullet goes all the way to the end of the slide, but the other ones all get truncated.
I'm not either, but I will fix it. Yeah, I noticed that too, and I was, yeah, so I will.
Google Slides
It
seems
is,
to be a pain in the
honestly,
rear.
sometimes I have to drag the box way off the screen just to get some of it to like fill
Oh
the
my
thing, and I'll make it better.
There's 2 boxes there.
Yeah.
Second bullet point under the E&D bullet, that recommend twice in there is bugging me.
Oh, yeah.
I think FinCom does, I had it for a second. Does not recommend using projected turnbacks to refill funds to, never mind. Take out the second recommend
I
somehow.
will make sure there are not 2 recommends in one sentence, because that's also, yeah.
You need to get rid of the first one.
To recommended levels.
You could replace the second recommended with guidelines.
See?
FinCom does not advise counting on future index to refill funds to.
Let us know when we're helping just too
Yeah,
much.
You're good. Just gonna go back there. Yeah, okay. Everything else good? I added that line about the stabilization funds because we talked about at the last meeting that would be some of the first buckets we would expect them to go into.
Well,
So close.
yeah, sorry, I was going to let it go by. These buckets aren't something that we can access necessarily,
Mr. Noon said,
but they should absolutely not be being fed into from the general fund as we go towards this.
that too, most of them aren't though.
Most of them are not, but 3 or 4 of them are,
Sure.
and therefore none of them should be. If that's on the horizon, then it needs to be stopped.
So we'll just watch for the coming budget. have feelings about that.
So would it be the FinCom, so should we discuss FinCom giving a recommendation that the fees associated with the enterprise fund should be raised to a level such that all of them are self-sustaining? Then how are we going to not put general funds into them?
I think
Not
it's
all of
just,
them are- not
it's
all of
just
them are
the nursing
Fee-based.
one, right?
No, there's three that are giving, there's three that are receiving.
Transportation needs to be subsidized, or has been subsidized, it needs to be subsidized, is concluding the question. The certain, like transportation, like the old nursing, like the ambulance, they have had general fund money put into them. To the extent you have general fund money put into them, you can take it back if they have surplus. Some of the others, no general fund money, like sewer, has ever gone into it, to my knowledge. And so you can't take their surplus money back. So it's a case-by-case basis.
Okay. All right. There was a request that rather than being in dollar amount order, this be in priority order based on which years the money is being accessed, potentially. And again, nothing has been approved. This is all capital improvement plan. So it is kind of maybe sort of in that order. However, and I'm not suggesting we keep this next slide in, this is what that looks like. So, you know, is the sidewalk program a first priority or a fourth year priority? You know, it's not as clear to put it in a priority list as one would hope. And then I did go and pull up the AB capital improvement planning page. I suspect it is not completely up to date, and I have sent off an email to that effect to Peter Light and JD to see if it is, and if it is not, could they update it and let me know? Because I know that we wanted to make sure that we were on top of any overlap as far as that sort of project goes. Alternatively, I can leave this in instead. But again, this is identified needs, not necessarily prioritized and voted on in a way in which it will be spent in the years that it is projected for.
Okay, so to recap, the previous slide is everything that's on this slide. And they're sort of in the same order, just one is in table form, one's in bullet point form.
I mean, no, not really. The replaced shuttle bus is the last thing on the list on the first page, but it's one of the things that's paid for most immediately, right? So the priority, according to David Martin, was that if it showed up in FY23, it is more of a priority than if it shows up in FY24, which is more of a priority than if it shows up in FY25. But as you can see, that is complicated for things like bridge design construction, sidewalk program, new construction, things that have multi-year taking of funds.
Okay.
For consistency, you have one ABHS, the next one's ABRHS, and the bottom three are ABHS.
Thanks. Yep, I will fix that. Yep.
I like both slides. I like the bulleted points. I think so. Then the question you're asking is, in what order should those be?
Well, I wouldn't keep them both.
You'd say one or the other.
I think this is a more complete story of the identified needs. It's
Okay.
a little busy, but if you guys don't mind it.
I think it is busy. I think it's an addendum. Anybody else feel differently?
This could be an addendum, and the other one go back to the way it was before with the dollar amounts.
Just go for the highest dollar amount down or the lowest dollar amount down or
Yeah,
whichever.
just in some order.
I like this.
I kind of like this in the order that it's in, if it's what we know currently is the potential priority.
But is it, I mean, the sidewalk.
Sense.
The sidewalk program is
Yeah.
$750,000 the first year, and then 3 years later it's 7.5 million.
Right.
So is the $750,000 more,
We're saying in the next 5 years, we're talking about spending $17.25 million on sidewalks. And it's a high priority.
it's in the plan.
I think if you want it to be concise, then you put it in bullets, but then list it, sort it in some way, preferably by the number. You could do it alphabetically, I don't care.
The problem, sorry, I was just going to, real quick, the problem, Ed, my husband looked this over just to see if he noticed anything, and he thought that it was very confusing to go between 100,000s to millions.
Exactly.
And by putting it
That's why
in
I'm
dollar
saying
order.
just sort it by dollar order. But if you want the detail and if you want it to be accurate, then just keep the subsequent slide.
Okay.
I would suggest you put a total on it, either in the title or at the bottom of the column. And I don't know that we have a number on Conant, so I don't know what to do with that one.
The other thing, these are debt exclusion capital improvement projects.
Right.
So not free cash projects or operating budget projects.
Roland?
All of these are good. If you put a total, put in the 1 to 5 years, 5 to 30.
Yeah, it would just be in the 1 to 5 years.
Okay, yeah, I
Right.
mean, just so it's not in the very top line. It's in
Yes.
the 1 to 5 years, asterisk, and then current total or something like that.
I like the other slide better myself. One thought on this one would be just remove anything that's smaller dollar items. It kind of gets lost. I mean, you could say, put the total at the top, and then you could list the top 5 items or whatever they are. $10 million items, $3 million items. But I like the other one myself. It's fine.
Yeah. I originally had a $500,000 cutoff, and then when I saw the school ones, nothing was really going to end up on that list.
I like this one just because the reader gets a sense of like the scheduling around it, and that it becomes more tangible and real to them if they see something like this, rather than just, I'm guilty of using the prior slide in presentations, and I always hate it when I do it. I feel like I lose my audience. It's just a bunch of jumbled up junk dumped on a page. That's my view.
Could we add a total line to the bottom of each?
Yep.
Yeah, and the right-hand column, so that it has total, and then a total for both
Sure.
tables.
Yeah, let me see if I can make this look pretty.
Yeah, if we did that, then I would agree with David that I would prefer this one
Yeah.
to the other one.
It's more accurate.
Yeah.
And these are capital debt projects?
And I would also say we need to truncate the description of some of these so
Yes,
that we can
I
make the
just copied
table
them in.
look bigger.
Yes, I will make them, as clear as possible. And then, go ahead, Roland. Sorry. Yeah. Right.
I'm sorry. Fiscal year 23 is already in the books, right? I mean, it's not done, but we're in. Should this really be 24, 25, 26, 24, 25, 26, 27, and 28? Because we're looking ahead. We're discussing fiscal year 24's recommendations.
I don't know if it hurts to discuss the current year.
Well, if you said to
But-
me, this is what we're looking at coming down the pike,
Well, we haven't done any of that yet.
we're going to.
Yeah.
I'm going to agree with Christie on this, that everything else in our point of view thus far, starting in fiscal year 24, we can cut fiscal year 23 off of this, I
Okay.
believe.
I agree.
Sure, okay. All right, so then this leads to,
I like it.
Jason, this is a slide. This is our chance to say something to the effect of, we sold people this big boardwalk campus and fire station with the promise that the payments wouldn't last very long, this painful period. And so this is the place to set up our argument that starting 2026 is not the time to push for big override or take out tons of debt.
So we've got the box and the drop-off, right? And that helps us tell our story that should we, anything we approve, gonna land there. And then we could add your comments about how we sold the new school building here, our recommendations.
Yeah. Would it help on the previous slide to have more of the history? To show that that spike in the middle is unusual? That was a big jump up from what had been a historic? Is it
Goes
not?
down, right?
It goes down significantly over the last 30 years. So I'm all for having a tight-end slide, but the minute somebody turns around and says, well, since we've got this drop-off on debt, we should be fine now, I want to immediately be able to go back and show the last 30 years and say, we need to be cognizant of the fact that we did quite a bit of debt all at once. And that is at a historically high percentage of our burden. And it's not time we're not allowed to just go refill this right now. Because if you look over the last bunch of years, it has come down, but historically we are at a high percentage point.
Okay.
What was the previous historic high?
It would have been in 2000 when we took out the Parker Damon building. And from a percentage perspective, I'd have to go back and look it up.
Not public safety?
We did Parker Damon and public safety within 2 years of each other.
There's also, I think, an addition to the high school at the same time,
Right.
roughly.
Yep. And even if you go back to that 2000 number, from a percentage perspective, we're asking more. So we need to be aware of the fact that we need to have a little bit of a break here. And I don't want the operating side to say, oh, the overall family tax bill is going to go down because as a result of this. Now it's time to have the operating override. Nor do I want the capital side to say, well, since the averaging, since that has fallen off, we can replenish it now. Neither of those things are acceptable to me, because I stood up in front of the town and I said, we are adding the fire station and the twin school because we're finally near the end. But we were not anticipating, we do not want to have this be 10 years of accelerated debt expenses. So we bring this back to the mean here. I was more eloquent at the time. I had a chance to write it.
All right, I'll extend it back a little and see how it looks. Okay.
So on this, for the second bullet, I would say approach capital projects from a needs basis.
Needs, not wants.
Is this the place to say something to the effect of what Jason just did, which is retirement of excluded debt does not mean new debt should be taken on?
Does it tell the story better to say keep the promise?
Well, it wasn't the town's promise, it was the school system's promise, but sorry, go ahead, Nisha.
Additional debt?
Not invite.
Okay.
This is where we get into the couple slides on taxpayer bills, so we can think about what we really want that title to be. slide that would go with it.
Yeah, we need to quantify the $1.30 as a percentage.
Not a percentage. Oh, you're saying make it a, yeah.
What is it, something like a 30%, right? It's huge.
It's going to be a different number by the time I actually post this.
Can we change it to other upcoming town fees or future?
Like other, sorry. Other future town fees, is that for
Yeah.
future town fees or? I guess other-
Future town fee increases?
Or town,
Well, I think fees implies the enterprise funds because those
We're
are
just,
fee-based.
these things are going to be increasing,
Yep.
but I think we need to say that it's increasing.
Also, I would change the word bills to, it's got to be prices.
That makes it sound like
other,
I would just bill increase.
Other future increases.
Yeah, like that.
On the sub-bullets of the first point, I would change all the word bills to prices. Because bills
Also-
can go up and down based on usage, but what we're really talking about is increase in prices.
Rates.
Yeah, rates.
Like that.
Yeah, this says, compared to this time last year, but I think the increases really started 2 years ago. If you compared it to 2 years ago, you'll see it's much more than a $1.30 increase in gas. It's probably $4
it's not a $4 increase in gas.
in the last 2 years.
No.
No.
Gas is at $4.50.
You don't buy $5 gas? I mean, $1 gas?
It was not
I didn't know where the $1 gas was.
It's been $1 since I was 8.
Well,
It was 2 something.
well, the thing is, it's higher than.
Yeah.
It's 2 years worth of data versus 1 year. They get the true picture of what's going on.
I'll look and see if I can find all of the data at the 2-year mark, but if I can't, then I'm going to keep it at the 1-year mark. It still gets across the story.
Okay.
It's significant, and it's the ideas that people are being hit in their wallets everywhere.
Are we at all worried about blowback? People saying, hey, if everything else is running at 8%, well, it's fine that the tax bill is only going up 5, because I'm not fine with that. Are we worried about any kind of blowback along those lines?
I'm not sure that argument would be relevant because what the story we're telling is that the people paying the tax bill have less and less and less discretionary income as a result of all of these things. And sure, raise it to whatever you want. Good luck collecting it. 2 different stories.
We're getting reelected.
Okay.
Which begs the question, what's the next slide?
Wait. Well, okay, so the next slide is also taxpayer bills. I'm open to more recommendations. That was pretty much what I had. I wondered if this was a good spot for this chart.
I like it.
Good.
This pie,
I'm sorry, I got to clarify one thing.
Yep.
Yeah, that's households with children in the school.
Yep,
That is households with school-aged children.
that's what you sent me.
Households with school-aged being K.
You're right, I will change it to say school-age children, because it's not just children, it's school-age children.
it's a higher
Yeah,
number.
It is, you're right.
Thank you.
I like this pie and would love this pie on the chart about household income versus tax bill. Although it doesn't change enough to be really telling that it's changing year on year by it wouldn't be very, anyway, to me, it would be visually striking It'd be 10%, it'd be okay. Just thinking about it.
Okay, so taxpayer bills. Do we, seeing these three slides as they relate to the conversation regarding our taxpayers and their bills, would you rather it say resident bills? Or are we back to taxpayer and it's fine?
Can you microphone?
Part of it is too, when you have a landlord, they're not gonna increase the rent right away because.
Oh, they will.
Well, if you're locked into a lease, you sign a lease in June, your taxes go up in July, you're not gonna be able to raise that rate until the following June, because, so, I like taxpayers.
I listened to some select board meetings where renters have called in and have been very upset that their rents are going up. And I actually like taxpayers here, in part because it shows the renters that the people who own their buildings are having to pay more. They're not, like, landlords aren't just pushing rents up because they can. They also have to pay increasing bills. So I like taxpayers.
Can I just make the comment that the title of the slide, the bullet point of the slide, and the chart, to me, don't seem to be cohesive? Because the pie chart is really just a demographic data point.
It's a factor, which we've asked them to consider.
And what recommendation are we making?
That you consider all factors impacting our taxpayers when making your budget recommendations.
But we're only showing one factor.
But we spoke of these factors and this factor. And it's sort of, we've kind of gone through here's the data and then here's our recommendation on 3 other sections. So I thought we should have a recommendation on this section as well. And
So
I'm happy to.
in typical 5-paragraph essay style, that last slide where we're talking about we told them what we're going to tell them, we told them what we told them, now we should tell them what we told them. Now's when we need to have a bullet point summary of everything we care about. One of which being slow the growth of the overall percentage of the median household income that you're taking out of people's pockets to fund government. We had an entire slide on that. We should have a bullet point right here.
Does it belong here or does it belong in our final thoughts?
Show me the final thoughts. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I don't think we need both slides. Pick one or the other.
Well, okay.
I agree with Jason's point. I would just remove the wording from the previous slide and somehow fit that pie chart into other demographic data in the previous slides and charts, or have it on its own.
Gonna have to lose the poor old man. Just saying, he's gotta go.
No, he doesn't have to go anywhere. He can stay.
No room for him.
Be nice.
So you guys want me to combine our recommendation regarding taxpayer bills with our final thoughts regarding the entire presentation?
No,
That's what I have been told.
our bottom line recommendations are all about the taxpayer bills.
So is the point that the slide is making that really, although most of the expenses are driven, a lot of the expenses are driven by the schools, they're borne disproportionately by the households without school-going children?
What we have found is that the majority of people in town think that this is a community full of families with school-age children.
Right,
And
and
that's,
it's
so
not.
it makes sense to have the majority of the money go to the schools.
Right.
And when we present, we find this is very eye-opening to all entities, that actually the majority of the households are paying for other people's kids to go to the school. And, or there's kids have already completed school or they haven't gone into the school yet. So I think for me, the point was that we were trying to get both entities to have a more holistic approach and a holistic look to their budgets and not just be myopic with what they're trying to do. So, you know, we wanted this slide in. We asked for it to be moved in. I didn't have anything else to say beyond this statement, and so I was like, well, I'll put it here, but I'm totally open to whatever else we
I
want.
actually like the slide. I'm wondering if we should even move it up front somewhere, because this is an important component of it. You know, a lot of the justification for the spending is, oh, but we need the schools to be in good shape. But it's actually impacting disproportionately a segment of the population that doesn't benefit. So
Well, they benefit.
Benefit from it.
I mean, I think, you know, there's a lot of arguments to be made that as a society, we invest, you know, investing in children, but also their children or grandchildren or others have probably gone through the school systems or.
And if the school
Steve-
system collapses, your
Granted.
house price
And
collapses.
housing prices.
At some point, people are going to rebel if this kind of,
Yeah.
you know, increase keeps happening, right?
Which is
So-
why we're
Which is the
pretty
point
strict.
I'm trying to make.
Yeah.
So I don't know where I'd fit it in the presentation, but I'd get rid of your little guy and I would slap the spending by entity pie chart that we prepare for budget background right next to it. That shows, you know, how much well, you could combine it. You could put Minuteman and AB together and say education spending versus non-education, and then make the conclusion that we're spending most of our money on education, even though a minority of families have school-age children. Without value judgments, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing.
I very much agree with Steve's comment. I like the idea of having a couple more factors on this chart and
Sure.
remove anything to do with recommendation.
No,
It's still
I'm
data.
sorry. I thought he was talking about having two charts next to each other.
Yep, having another chart here.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
And we-
split out Minuteman.
We probably have it.
Don't lump it in.
Don't
Split
lump it in,
out.
that's fine.
Why?
That's the way it is.
Because they are,
No, we're not talking about dividing out our assessments. We're talking about,
Because this here is households with school-age children versus not, so the other chart would be what we're spending on education versus not.
I know, what I'm saying is Minuteman is part of education.
Yeah, so
but
he's saying.
I'm saying split it out.
He wants Minuteman to be
Right.
separate.
Yeah, that's fine.
We're not,
Why?
Because the taxpayer has representation, much more representation over what happens at the Acton-Boxford Regional School District than we have over a 9-community district that is almost thoroughly unaccountable to us. It's a different entity. It is. If the taxpayers revolt, they can put 4 new people on the school committee in 2 years and make changes. If we revolt at the price of Minuteman, there's not a damn thing we can do about it other than potentially exit Minuteman. It's a different entity. It should not be lumped together as having the same roles.
Well, I disagree that, you know, we're talking about education, and if we look at that pie chart, we're talking about families with school-age children. Some of those school-age children are being educated at Minuteman.
some of them aren't even being educated in town.
Right.
Not being paid for by our taxes.
Still think we should split it out.
I think that's a different argument to be had somewhere else. open to
I'm
having that.
fine if you want to just show Minuteman as, I mean, we have the chart.
I can-
We used to produce it every year for the budget background section, you know, spending by entity. That's three wedges, the town, A, B, and Minuteman. That's fine.
I think people can do the math if they're next to each other.
I just think it's complicates things for people. It muddies our message. I agree we should be having a discussion about Minuteman. But if you're saying education versus people who are using it, it's a clear message. Education plus this other segment I don't necessarily know as much about because I'm not super involved in the school situation.
I can pop them out so that education, AB and Minuteman pop out, so that they're distinct but clearly together.
That works.
Great.
Sounds good.
Okay, So that was, so then we're basically losing this, I think?
No.
No.
Okay. So we're going to keep this. Else anybody wants to add on?
I would reverse the order of the bullets a little bit. So
Okay.
I would say, I would add bullets 3 and 4 as 1 and 2. And then the other two bullets, 1 and 2 would be 3 and 4.
I would switch 3 and 4 because the bottom line,
It's our final message.
our final
Yeah.
message is continuing to increase the burdens of blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
And can lead to override. Drive it home. And can lead to override. Just drive it home. When you say it's unsustainable,
So-
okay, what do we mean by that? We all
It's
want to
unsustainable
drive.
within Prop 2.5. I would put it that way. It's unsustainable within Prop 2.5.
So we argued about this last time. I think we need to mention that an override is coming unless things change significantly.
So that should be the last one.
So in our last meeting, we pulled override statement out of 3 different places. And then Charlie had the final word. The override statement's now in this presentation in 2 other places, but not on this last slide. So
So I would say,
do we want it back?
put it here. First slide, last slide? Done deal.
And I think you need to be clear, people need to understand that we are heading towards one.
We're,
Not that only do we not support one, but
we've been told by the entities involved that they're not anticipating needing one, and that can change next year or the year after that. But
exactly.
Right.
We need
to
look
say we're
forward.
heading towards one,
We are.
it's potentially within their control. So if it's within their
Well,
control,
So you pull out that thing at the bottom and add 3 or 4 words to the 4th bullet. Continuing to increase the burden on residential taxpayers is unsustainable, and either say within Prop 2.5,
Yep.
or say, and will lead to an override.
Well, but they're separate. This is saying taxpayers can't handle the burden. An override is saying we might not live within Prop 2.5.
you're really speaking to this. Towns and schools must manage budgets within revenue sources or
Face an override.
face an override.
And then the last point is saying, and taxpayers might not support it.
And really, it's the taxpayers that have stood up and said we do not support it. Even more so than the FinCom.
Not yet.
They haven't
I
really
thought
been
they
touched.
spoke pretty loud and clear at the town meeting.
I don't know. There was so little data behind that conversation. It was a feeling. It was a feeling that you must have $1.5 million to spare, despite the fact that you've had $1.5 million increase this year on top of all of the other things. And a lot of the talk I see on Facebook is people who had no idea that the school made cuts to FTEs, despite our stating so and them stating so. I think it's an education moment that we can be a part of.
And I think we need to make sure to educate the school committee, especially, I think they're so focused on running the school district, which is what their job is, that they don't get the broader view. And I think it's really important for them to understand, as we say, the taxpayers really can't handle much. And especially with the teacher's contract coming up, that could make or break whether there's an override. If they set this up to be unsustainable in those small percentages you showed earlier.
It's been a while since we presented this to the school committee, so we should plan to do that as soon as possible.
Yes, we've had 2 requests already. Okay. Does that conclude our discussion about the point of view then?
No, we're going to quickly go through addendum.
Okay.
Steve definitely wants OPEB, and I think it's useful, and I've asked for updates on these numbers. So I'm sure they'll be coming to me. I only asked like
Right, Steve?
a couple hours ago, so no pressure at this point. This is just in general our reserve policy. We'll do the math and figure out what number goes in our recommendation for keeping them above the 3% floor. This one was recommended that we just remove it.
Why?
Because you weren't here. And
Yeah.
it's your favorite slide.
I don't want it removed.
So,
I mean, if I get voted down, I get voted down, but if it's in the appendix, it's valuable data, we should have it.
Yeah, I think it's valuable data. Also, did I ask to have it removed?
nope.
Okay.
I got some feedback and it was to remove it, but I'm not hearing any pushback,
It
so.
should say appendix.
Yeah, sorry, I will change all of the headers. They don't say appendix, they will. This one says a lot.
Don't say too much.
It's very busy.
So the declining yellow line is the free cash balance, correct?
Yeah,
That's the certified.
oh, sorry, my bad, I will give you guys a little better view, slightly better view.
Free cash is a percent of the total municipal budget.
Right, basically, that's our policy. It's the certified free cash as opposed to projected spending. Because we take whatever certified and we spend ahead.
So at the beginning of fiscal year '23, we had 4 point whatever available to us. We committed 1.25 million to spend, which means we project, barring turnbacks, we expect to be at 3.18.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd keep it in the appendix. It would only be brought out of the appendix in the case of dire emergency,
Okay.
because you're going to lose your audience
Yeah,
pretty
it's-
quickly.
yeah.
But it does establish some long-term trends.
You'll lose your audience when you go to the PTSOs, but this is definitely the type of thing you want to sit down when you sit down with the select board and the school committee members over
It's a
coffee
sit-down, yeah.
and say, this is a slide, I'm going to pull this one out for you. This is not one you want to show at the PTSO meeting.
Okay. This one can go.
Go.
Anybody want to fight for it?
Nah, you can let it go.
Look at that. So this is a longer view of the upcoming debt service. But I think what we actually discussed is that we're more interested in what was behind
Yes.
us because ongoing is static
Yes,
until they,
yeah, and ongoing
we hear
is,
otherwise.
ongoing is not informative. Previous is informative.
Yeah.
Roland? How long do we bond the fire station?
30,
Yep.
We did, and the boardwalk as well?
30.
So it's
I
all
thought we went-
2050.
I thought we went less than that for some reason. I thought with the fire station, I thought we
I
went
mean-
like 15, 20,
30?
15, 20.
30.
Thank you.
All right.
There's no reason not to at 2.15%.
Right.
So I would swap this for the one that shows the history. I don't think we need this.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think
But I
that was
think the one with the
the,
history,
is the way to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. We decided that backwards looking actually is
Backwards is
better
good.
for our story than forward looking right now. Okay. And we can always do this again. Revenue sources are probably useful to have on hand in case people ask.
And you put it in the warrant article every year, so it's good to have.
Okay. Do we want to continue to have this
Yes.
around?
Yes.
Yes, this is important information if somebody asks, where did the ARPA money go? Tell me about ARPA and what they're spending that on.
Steve give you a nice shrug, like, come here.
I think you should just have it in your wallet, in case it comes up in
Yeah,
conversation.
yesterday's newspaper.
Well, what I'm interested in, honestly, is this was projected, what's actually happening with it, which I think is a more interesting.
And something that I recommend the chair ask the Board of Selectmen to bring to us in 6 months. Or not even 3 months.
Yep, Roland. There's a what now?
So if you look at the bullet points at the bottom.
Yep.
That's that, the street parking. There's a key.
Design.
Design with an E, yeah.
So it should be
Okay. I don't think, this is not my slide, I don't think I can actually change it. But, no, I can't. So that's one that, when I get the originals from Mike, I'll clean that up, just that little E. Okay, do we need this?
Make it bigger.
Oh, sorry, it's really small. This is all, a lot of this is available on our town website.
I don't see speaking to it.
Right. I'm not sure it is part of our conversation.
Does it impact us financially?
No.
Delete it.
It is important for people, again, to know what percentage of the population is retirement age,
Yeah.
et cetera, but I don't think this is.
Good point.
It's
I
just-
would delete the race information. I'm not sure that that's finance related. Mike, I'm sorry, Mike.
You were saying it's not part of our conversation, but I think when you talk about the economy of Acton and its future, I don't know how you can do that without looking at its diversity, the age mix, the 18 population, the cultural mix, things like that, are all important background information. How many kids under 18, things like that. We might not have to have a conversation about it, but people ask, there's the data.
So in that case, I would say we need to change the size of the data that's on this slide and minimalize what's less important and maximize what is more important. Certainly, age and population growth is more important than race.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
No,
You were
I'm
gonna
sorry. This is all wonderful data. In order to make this sustainable as a presentation that we maintain going forwards, I think at some point we need to choose what data we want to keep in general. We have a large appendix right now, and I know that, I'm sure Mike will tell you that it's work to find all this information, and continuing to update it annually might not be worthwhile. So if we're going to, we could put a stake in the ground and say this is for the year 2020 or something, and not plan to update it for another 10 years. Or take it out because we can speak to it. Or just simplify it to the age distribution.
Yeah, I wonder, let's look at the next slide too. Maybe there's a couple of things we want to pick out. Age distribution, sorry, not this one. This one tends to be useful to have at hand. It's not updated.
Well, there's your pie.
Yeah, there's the pie.
But there's, right, that's the pie, exactly.
There's the pie.
So the pie in the middle will actually end up on that other slide. And then
Can you
the,
face it?
so there's Pac-Man?
No, so that the municipal square, 35% lines up in the same direction as the households using the education.
I want to make it Pac-Man.
Okay, go for it. It's not the right mouth.
All right, I will face it so that it mirrors,
It is.
yeah. And then, let me just see. So this would be another one that I don't think is data relevant to our discussions? Yeah. Okay. I'm just gonna. This is more detail on ARPA. I'll make it big, but you still won't be able to read it because it's tiny, tiny.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, so,
That's
and it's.
not useful.
And like Steve said, this is yesterday's news
Yeah.
at this point. We don't even know how it all bore out as far as what. Not to get off our radar, but.
They've got to do the next tranche, right? They
Yeah.
didn't spend all 7.3 in the first year, so,
Yeah.
you know, what are they going to do this year?
So rather than our point of view, I wonder if just us as a committee asking for an ARPA update and.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah. We'd be unable to speak to this in a presentation.
Good to,
There's not a bill-paying American or Actonian that doesn't know what inflation is right now.
We would look like we were mansplaining if we did this.
and we spoke to specific data in the previous slide on inflation. Okay, excellent. Right? So,
Looks good.
I think we're officially down to like 15 slides that actually are our presentation, and everything else is addendum, which is pretty spiffy.
Good.
I'm out.
Thank you so much. So does that conclude our discussion about the point of view for tonight? Wonderful. So moving on to FinCom related business. Our next meeting would be 2 weeks from today on the 23rd at 7:30 right here in 204. Any issues with that? I see none. And anybody have anything specific they'd like to mention that they would prefer to have on the agenda that they want to throw out at the moment? Nothing new there. And any liaison reports or other information from anybody right now?
No.
Okay. On that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I will move to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? Thank you.